Willie, are companies getting too big because our government
Hmm.
apparently thinks so?
Yeah, you're right. I think we should have Lena Khan break us up for the good of our customers.
You know, Lena Khan is very interesting because she really doesn't have that much real world experience, in my opinion.
Right.
I think she just came from Yale, right? Is that correct?
Something like that. She made a big ruckus up in New Haven with some fancy paper that got published in the Student Journal about how Jeff Bezos will suck out our souls and deprive us all of an Amazon free existence.
Now, do you think that's the case? Because, in my opinion, I think as long as consumers are protected and consumers are happy, which the last I checked, everyone who's an Amazon customer is pretty happy. You can shop online via your phone, whatever. You can buy anything, almost anything, other than a missile, and get it
Hmm.
delivered either the next day or in 2 days, depending on your membership. And I don't see any danger to consumers, which the last I checked, unless they're teaching something else up in Yale, which by the way, Harvard and Penn are better. Sorry. I'm just an alumni speaking, but the last I checked, antitrust law was built to protect the consumer, which is what was it President Teddy Roosevelt. That was what his intent was.
Well, antitrust law was built to waste taxpayer money because the Sherman Antitrust Act was worthless and the Clayton one was not much better. But I think what you're talking about is the consumer welfare standard, Vin.
Oh yeah, the consumer welfare standard. But real quick on those acts you mentioned, why were they created other than wasting taxpayer dollars, as we all know?
Well, they got created because smart businessmen like Carnegie and Rockefeller were just too damn good at their jobs. And wouldn't you know it, the politicians are always just looking out for the little guy, and they thought that Standard Oil, among others, were being a little anti-competitive. But last I checked, killing your competition is the point of business.
Yeah, that's true. And often when you have competition, you you drive to be better than your competitors, and as a result, you create better products. I mean, you look in the, I mean, speaking of
Typically.
Formula One this weekend, right? Which I hope Ferrari gets their act together. Often, what happens is you try to create better product than your competitor, and as a result, consumers benefit. If I'm correct here, right? Am I wrong or?
Well, Vin, that's really interesting. I think that would make a great topic for an episode of our podcast. What do you think?
I think so. So let's get started on it. I think
All
today
right,
we're going to talk about
antitrust.
antitrust, right?
Hello,
Well,
degenerates. Welcome to the show.
welcome, fellow knuckle draggers. We're going to talk about antitrust. Well, I think with antitrust, that's always been the hot topic.
Yep.
I mean, it started even the Trump administration, right? It started
Yep.
there, and now it's definitely dragged on to the current administration of Biden administration. And it's both political parties that's using antitrust for political matters, unless I'm wrong. I mean, Democrats are using it because they think tech companies are getting too big,
Hmm.
and are not censoring. Oh, I'm sorry. They're not cleaning messaging right through to the threat of others, which it's censoring. And I think people should use their own uh, brains and intelligence to be able to filter out what's real and what's not, and do fact checking. Which the last I recall, you learned that since fifth grade. And then you have Republicans who are using it politically to attack big tech because they're sorry, I'm just going to say it, they're butthurt
Yep.
about their reputations being attacked. Um, and we'll go from there. So antitrust. Sorry for blubbering on about the political side. I'm sure a lot of our listeners really want to learn more about antitrust. It's been said a lot in the news. It's been the center of attention right now, especially with big tech companies. But it's not only with big tech. It's in pharmaceuticals. It's in manufacturing. It's in many industries, and it's not only in the United States, but it's also very prevalent in Europe and other
Yep.
countries. And I think this has huge implications not only for our economy, but for also national security and the future of this country. So with that, I
Yeah.
know, Willie, you have some thoughts, but I definitely think the focus should really be on consumers and not about politics or about government or anything
Right.
else, but it's about the consumers.
Right. And I mean, let's just ignore Europe right now because they're proof that socialism will never work. But Vin, I think what
100%.
you're referring to is the Consumer Welfare Standard, which was actually started by the Chicago School. In fact, that's the Chicago School of Antitrust. And the whole point of that is that courts should be directed to focus on the effects that a challenged business has on the consumers rather than the competitors. So Judge Robert Bork was a big champion of it back in the day, and we'll get into one of the cases that can be politely referred to as antitrust malpractice
Right.
here in this show. But the whole point of it is that of CWS is that you need to look at a business not in isolation, but in at a system level, right? We are building and selling products to consumers. You know, what is the end result of that? Are they being harmed? And if so, obviously do something about it. Otherwise, just kind of let it be. And it doesn't just apply to preferred pricing. That was one of the big pushes in the early antitrust cases that the monopolies were able to price everybody out by dropping everything into the dirt, and they could still survive because they controlled the whole supply chain. But
Right.
there's also a duty to deal aspect to it. So if I'm a big tech company and I don't like you, I'm not going to allow your stuff on my platform. I'm not going to allow you to deal directly with me. Or if I have a supplier, I'm going to force them to deal directly with me the way I want to be dealt with. And, that's just kind of called me running my business how I want.
Right.
But the interesting thing about consumer welfare standard is, it wasn't just a purely theoretical, academic uh, train of thought that people published in journals and wrote dissertations about, and then nobody cared about. This was actually a philosophy that was supported for 20 years at the highest levels of politics by both parties. Okay, yes, this is starting in the 80s with Reagan when politics were still somewhat civil because we didn't
Right.
have social media. But Reagan, Bush, and Clinton all supported the consumer welfare standard as the metric by which anti-competitive or monopolistic behavior was to be judged. And I think that's telling because you know it wasn't quite as partisan and divided as these days. You said, both sides hate companies now for, completely different reasons, but at the end of the day, both of those reasons lie upon one party or the other being butthurt that the world is not functioning according to how they think it should, whether it's, Republicans complaining about Twitter and Facebook being too lefty and censoring them, or the Democrats, Klobuchar and Warren specifically, as well as everyone's favorite insane grandpa Bernie Sanders, screaming and complaining that they're just taking advantage of the people without any real understanding or investigation of what these companies actually do and how they
Right.
actually operate.
Well, and also on top of that, I think, you hit it spot on. Politics. Politics back, in the 80s and 90s, even the early 2000s were much more civil. We
Sure.
had both parties who, yes, we may disagree, whether it's Republican, Democrat, or whatever, people still respected one another and they made compromises. And I
Right.
think one of the things that really is hurting our country, and we're just talking about one of the issues right now, which is antitrust, which affects the economy and the free markets and how capitalism works. But we're not able to compromise anymore, and it's really going to tear our country apart, especially with the companies that are fueling our economy, creating jobs and giving back to our communities. And I think that's one of our biggest fears
Right.
that you and I have is
Oh yeah.
that today's modern political system, which is more divided than ever, people
Yeah.
can't even respect one another. They can't even listen to each other. They can't even negotiate anymore, which I think is a very critical skill set to have as a
Of
politician.
course.
And that's why our system is the best system in the world, is because you can have both sides who disagree tremendously, but they still respect one another, and they will come to a compromise that ultimately becomes the best solution possible for the people of our country, we the people. And I think people
Right.
need to wake up, because antitrust is a huge issue that is going to really test the system, in my opinion. And I'm
Sure.
sure you agree.
Well, for
Our
now.
system's gonna be tested here,
Well,
right?
right. And you have both sides that are ripping the country apart, and somebody much wiser and more deceased than I am said that a house divided against itself cannot stand. And
Right.
we're seeing that now. And the term I love is actually hipster antitrust,
Oh
right?
boy.
You're not applying an objective economic metric, but you're just kind of shooting from the hip, right? You're doing antitrust actions because it's some kind of misguided moral or ethical impetus that you have as a politician, and probably catering to your constituents who really don't have enough warm brain cells to rub together to see how the machine actually works. But you bring up a good point that a lot of what the antitrust philosophy is based on, this consumer welfare standard. It gets criticized a lot, especially nowadays, because people say that it doesn't capture all harmful monopolistic conduct, including concentration of power, environmental degradation, income inequalities, bargaining disparities, etc. Uh, that may be true. Okay, I'm not a sociologist and I don't care about personal problems, but at the end of the day, the legal system has to be fair and impartial, and that also means that it has to be objective.
Right.
If you look at antitrust and the consumer welfare standards specifically, the grounds that justify antitrust action are rooted in a neutral element, economic
Right.
harm, right? That's the beauty of numbers, is that they don't lie. You can certainly dress them up to sing your song, but at the end of the day, it's really hard to argue that 2 and 2 is 4, period. And that means that the welfare standard requires a set of testable claims. Okay, this is the closest that we're ever likely to get to having an objective science in something like politics and legislation, which is inherently crazy and insane and not calculable. But you have to legislate not from the bench, but from that point of objectivity, right? If economic harm is not the metric, which a lot of people seem to think it's not, well, what is the metric? What is another objective and fair and neutral rubric that we can use to gauge monopolistic behavior?
I mean, that is spot on. And one of the things, I was just thinking of right now is people are using antitrust for other matters that don't correlate, right? When it comes to
Right,
other policy matters and other legal matters, they are using it for, let's say it's environmental or income inequalities, right? Or whatever other matters that are not economic, they're trying to tie that into antitrust, where that's not relevant at all. Antitrust law is
right.
about, the economy and about companies. Are they harming the economy? If they're not, then it's not antitrust. And I think that's what's really missing here, because Republicans and Democrats both are guilty of this. They're trying to
Hmm.
say, you're doing things that are harming, X, Y, and Z. But if that result doesn't harm the economy, then you're not talking about antitrust. You're talking about other policy matters that you need to focus on those policy arguments and not around antitrust.
Sure. And what's some people, yes, predominantly on the left, because that's the side that's choosing this argument, they seem to forget that a lot of these ancillary concerns, the environment, for example, right? They have this doom and gloom picture that we're going to have, Amazon's going to control everything and they're just going to belch black smoke into the air and dump a bunch of toxic waste into the rivers. You know what? The typical arguments of environmental harm. But they seem to forget that everything in our society, sooner or later, in some way, boils down to money. Okay, so if they're going to argue that monopolistic behavior degrades the environment, okay, well, environmental law is a separate set of regulations, and when you violate environmental law, you are fined. Well,
Right.
if you are a business, you don't want to be fined because that eats into your profit margin. So if you have to raise your price or do something else that may cause consumer harm, you have this kind of non-objective, touchy-feely argument at the end of it all is still going to tie back to economics.
Right.
Okay, it
And
is
two
still
points to
going to
that
tie back.
too.
Yeah,
And two quick points on that too. With competition and a free market, it works itself out end of the day. And to the consumer welfare
right,
standards point, unless it's hurting the consumers, the free market doesn't, the free market will work itself. For
right,
example, you bring up, we bring up Amazon a lot. Amazon's a great example. With Amazon, people think they are, they just control everything. But end of the day, yes, they may be a large company and they do really well, but they force their competitors to do even better, and
right.
consumers are better off for it. Look at Walmart,
Exactly.
for example. Walmart now is becoming an e-commerce powerhouse. People don't realize that, and also they have thrown in even better options like curbside pickup. That's very efficient, very effective. And that has forced now Amazon to try to open up their own stores, right?
Hmm.
And also at the same time, with Amazon, with Walmart, you talk about income inequalities, but the competition has now forced for better pay. Walmart started to increase their minimum wage because they wanted to bring more talent, whether it's salary or minimum wage workers. They're starting to, raise their pay so they can attract them from Amazon. And now Amazon has countered to also bring people into theirs so that they can, or sorry, to increase their numbers and pay and benefits so they can attract talent in the same pool. And
Right.
additionally, both are making investments into communities, whether it's for charity or investments,
Hmm.
building more stores, more facilities, more of anything related to their business. So, end of the day, consumers in those neighborhoods, whether they're buying the products or services directly, or they're living in those neighborhoods, or they're being hired, it is positively affecting them. And in that case, it isn't an antitrust matter. Now, I'm sure we're going to touch social media here soon, but that's a key point I want to make out for people to think about when it comes to antitrust. Put yourself in the consumer's shoes because you are the consumer, and are you harmed right now by Amazon or these other big companies? And it's not just big tech, right? It's all companies in general. Are you harmed right now of these by these big companies? If not, then no, it's not antitrust. And these politicians need to think that way as well. You hear Josh Hawley on the Republican side that is absolutely for antitrust. You hear folks on the Democratic side, as you mentioned, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, and Amy Klobuchar. Everything that comes out of their mouths, it's all politically driven. And I know they're politicians, but it's politically driven and it's matters that are not correlated with antitrust. It's not economic. It's their own agendas or it's their party's agendas, and they're not truly thinking about the consumer.
Right. And that's part of the reason why consumer welfare standard needs to be fully understood by the legislators who are completely ignoring it. When you're
And their
looking at,
staffers.
and their staffers who actually probably do all the work for them anyway,
Oh no,
but
that's a fact.
but, when you're looking at businesses' behavior and you're claiming antitrust, the thing with consumer welfare standard is that it considers quality, not just price. Okay, it's called the theory of harm. So if you're selling dirt cheap, but what you're selling is complete crap, you are harming consumers. You are selling things that are not fit for purpose. And
Mm-hmm.
yes, there are ways of, making people whole in those scenarios, usually involving lawsuits. But the point is that there is still traceability of harm. Okay, now that's important because what that does is it helps the consumer welfare standard be impervious to technology. All right. Technology has made everything cheaper, easier. I can get all my groceries through my phone, for instance, right? I am more convenienced by those developments. But when you adopt this framework for antitrust, as opposed to just blindly legislating from the bench, you get a very adaptable toolkit because as innovation drives technology, as innovation drives production efficiencies, et cetera, everything gets more better, more faster. You are still able to analyze objectively what is being done to the end user. That's the problem with the Sherman Act and the Clayton Act, is that they're focused on protecting competitors primarily, and they're focused on punishing companies for being big when we should be celebrating them because they didn't get that big by being stupid. But the thing with the consumer welfare standard is that it's adaptable to the modern age, which old antitrust legislation is not, because CWS can be applied to products and services that are offered at zero cost to the end user, like social media. See, I told you we'd get to it sooner or later,
Right. Mm-hmm.
right? And the whole point with this, CWS is not a shield. Okay, it is not made to prevent interventionism or legislation. Okay, we are not. It does not espouse some libertarian paradise where I trade you 30 beans for you carving me a bow, and
Right.
that's our economy. Okay, if anything, the consumer welfare standard encourages interventionism, right? Because it encourages challenging deals like M&A deals that are going to make companies bigger and more powerful, first and foremost by looking at whether or not the consumers are being damaged. And that's not my opinion. That's actually from Fiona Scott Morton, who is a Yale economist, and also Herbert Hovenkamp. Hopefully, I pronounced his name
Well, I'm sure,
correctly.
right. I'm
Who,
sure
if
Fiona
not, we'll
has,
hear about it.
and I'm sure Fiona Scott Morton has some thoughts about Lena Khan, but we'll leave it to her.
Oh, sure, sure. But Herbert Hovenkamp, who's a Penn Law professor, here we have two examples of academics and researchers who are in a very stereotypically, heady, kind of idealistic environment, right? Academics, research, they're actually supporting this this framework, and it's not just, again, it's not just the crazy Republicans, it's not just the idealists. This is a bipartisan or nonpartisan tool that can be used, and it's being completely ignored by legislators because, again, it's the hipster antitrust uh, fashion trend that's going on right now, and it's going to ruin a lot of people's lives because at the end of the day, whether you like Amazon or you hate them, if you're one of the 100,000 or whatever many employees that they have, you are able to feed your child because Jeff Bezos gave you a job. So don't spit at the hand that feeds you quite so
Or
quickly,
Bezos' competitors.
or Bezos' competitors.
And there's more
Exactly.
and more popping up every day. And I don't think people realize that. I mean, you and I are in in the private equity investment world. We see it. There are always competitors that come out, and let's talk about two quick things.
Sure.
One, free market, and two, social media. Right. So to
Hmm.
start, with the free market, if you look at again, like you said, with M&A and everything, just look at history and how antitrust, antitrust law doesn't need to really be tapped into, as you said, unless it truly harms consumers. And that's why the consumer welfare standard works. But if you look at
Hmm.
history, often you didn't have to tap into it. I mean, let's focus on social media, and I'm
Okay.
sure you have more examples as well. I remember growing up, you had AOL. Remember AIM? After
uh,
after school, you would race home to
yeah.
have debates on AIM and thinking you're the biggest, smartest badass on the AIM world. And
Right.
then you had MySpace, right? And you had all these, uh, all these companies. But then what happened is Facebook emerged, Twitter
Right.
emerged, Instagram now, which I know is part of Facebook, but we'll talk about that later. So you
Yeah.
had all these others that popped up because they delivered a better consumer experience. And
Right.
it wasn't their fault that they delivered and they invested more, they worked harder, they pushed innovation. There's a lot of work in building a company. And I think a lot of these
Sure.
politicians don't realize how much work is into it. And it's not their fault that they built a much better platform and a better business than these other ones. And now there is no AIM, right? AOL is practically, nothing.
I was
And
gonna say, doesn't somebody in like Nebraska or
I
something
don't
that
know.
runs on satellite internet? Don't they still
Yeah.
use
It's like
AOL?
Yahoo. Yeah, it was like Yahoo. And sorry, Google came about and created a much better search engine and better
Right.
products, right? And then Microsoft and then Apple. It's like, look, sorry, that's why the free market is so beautiful. It allows people who see a problem or see a
Hmm.
product or service that isn't optimal or the best, and they are and if they're entrepreneurial, they create their own business and they work hard at it, they grow it, they work at, tirelessly nights. I mean, you and I know about this. We've created many startups or invested in them. I remember those long nights.
Yep.
Not sleeping for a long time. Hell, I
They
got a
build
seizure.
character.
Well, yeah, and I got seizures multiple times because I went so long without sleeping. But we did that because we knew that we were building or delivering better products or services or investing in the companies that are much better so that consumers benefit. That's the goal. So
Right.
again, the free market works because it enables it enables people to do that. Unlike other systems where it doesn't allow that to happen. It's controlled
Right.
by the state or it's controlled by too much regulation. So it doesn't allow encouragement for innovation or entrepreneurship to deliver better products. And number two, just real quick before you jump in on both,
Hmm.
social media. I mean, you look at
Oh yeah.
we look at the social media world. Democrats and Republicans are using the issue of free speech, the First Amendment,
Hmm.
which is a totally separate issue and policy matter, and trying to merge and blur that into antitrust when that has nothing to do with the antitrust law. It's like, yes, I know Facebook's big, Twitter's big, all that,
Right.
and they allow free speech, and they're trying to make every excuse, but you know these companies are trying to deliver a product for their users that what their users like, so they can survive
Hmm.
as a business. So if you have an issue about whether it's free speech or false information or whatnot, it's truly up to the policymakers to talk about different matters outside of antitrust. That's free speech. That's other matters. And lastly, real quick, end of the
Hmm.
day, what's different from I'm probably gonna get a lot of hate mail for this, but why can't we human beings use our damn brains to not trust everything we read on social media, right?
Right.
And do our own research and think logically. You can't blame Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and Pinterest and all these social media companies, Google and all these guys or gals, whatever. I don't want to get in trouble for that too. You know, why can't you think on your own? They're just trying to deliver a consumer experience. And if you as a consumer enjoy it, then so be it. But
Right.
that goes back to education, which I know we talked about the last episode, but I'll end there as I know you
Right.
probably have thoughts on those points.
Well, I mean, to your last point, why can't people use their damn brains? Because intelligence is not communist. Okay, it has not been distributed equally amongst all of the participants in society. But
Tell Bernie that.
Well, I would, but he won't understand. So, here's the thing. First of all, I find it incredibly ironic that Republicans, by and large, are making a lot of noise with regard to these big tech companies, considering that they're the party that says let business do what business wants. So that's a
Right.
little bit of heresy on their part. But yes, you bring up great points. There is no such thing as an iron throne. When you're at the top, okay, everybody wants to bring you down, and it's different if this were the 1800s or the 1600s or whatever. Okay, if you dominate the landscape in wagons or farmland or whatever,
Right.
and I want to dethrone you from your position, okay, I can't because if I'm some poor brokeback little serf who's barely scrabbling to try and get by. I do not have the means to acquire assets that will allow me to compete with you. Okay. There's too much hard investment that I would need to make that society is just not geared to allow me to do. But we're not serfs in in 16th century. Okay. That's the thing with technology is that it finally allows people to compete with enormous corporations that have, bottomless pockets, balance sheets that are 3 miles long with all the stuff they own. And it allows people to finally say, if I can code good enough and I can make the electrons do what I want in a certain way, I can create something of value, not only regardless of your existence as a super huge company. And not only because of your existence, but it's because I want to do it. And I end up with a product that solves what I deem as a problem. And I create something of value. And now you, the super huge company, not only are you oftentimes not able to do anything, but honestly, the quickest way to get me out of your hair if I'm competing with you is to buy me out. And when people complain about, well, Facebook and Google, they're just putting all these small companies out of business. No, they're not. They're writing, billion-plus-dollar paydays for these founders. Do you really think they care? Do you think that, the founder of what is it, WhatsApp that Facebook bought for 19 billion
Right.
or something a couple years ago?
Right.
Do you really think that the people who got a huge payday from that are complaining about, Facebook monopolizing social media? No, are you kidding me? They're living the American dream. That's what makes our society fantastic is we have the opportunity because of our economy, because of how our legal structure is created, we have the opportunity to literally go from nothing to being a multi-billionaire, not overnight, but we certainly have a lot more upward mobility
Right.
than we would have had 40 years ago, 50 years ago. Okay. And that's the problem with a lot of these lawmakers. They're stuck in the Standard Oil days. Okay. They see
Mm-hmm.
bigness as badness. And, they go out with these ridiculous, moral podiums to try to punish businesses for being big. They're trying to punish Facebook and Google and Amazon for things that those companies could have done, not for
Right.
things that those companies have done. Okay, that's un-American. This is not Minority Report. Congress cannot use precogs to predict the future.
Ugh,
Okay,
darn it.
well, probably for the best.
Right.
But punishing companies on moral grounds for things that they haven't actually done yet is not how our justice system is supposed to work.
Right. And also, I think a lot of these politicians or, just the general, person, I'm not trying to downplay it, but not many people know how a business truly works. You see a lot of these
Right.
movies, and you hear a lot about stories, but you're only getting the simple overview and often too much of the negative when, you should really dig deep or talk to someone who's built a business. I think that's the biggest problem. You hear, you see the Senate, you see Congress always having panels, right? Those hosting panels and all this sorts, and these what you call them. I'm losing my train of thought. These I just saw this morning. These summits, right? To try to
Right.
understand an issue. I wish they would hold a damn summit about how to build a business and what is the American dream.
Right.
And that's why, if they knew just a little bit of what it takes to build a business and why you build a business, I think they'll be better off in creating policy. You know, Often we talk about, usually when you build a business, it's often because, yes, you want to make money, you want to do better for your family and for yourself. But often, you're doing it because you see there's a hole in the market or there's a flaw in a product or service, and you're trying to fill that void. And yes, once you build that company, everyone has a different pathway. You know, you and I, Willie, may like to build our own business and keep it building and keep it going, IPO and keep it running. But not everyone's like that. There's people that just want to exit. They want to go through the process, raise Series A through D, go public or exit, whether it's an IPO exit or it's selling out to another company. Everyone is different. And that's, again, the beauty of the
Right.
free market. If you work hard for it and you do everything accordingly and fight through it and accomplish your goals, you reach your goals. And and everyone has different goals and you'll accomplish them. And they can't use antitrust as a guinea pig or a tool to leverage their actual other policy goals. And it's very
Right.
unfair for the business world and our free market. And that scares me because, we touched on it before, that has a lot of economic issues, economic effects, but also national security effects and other
Mm-hmm.
matters, because you have now rising superpowers. I mean, they practically are a superpower, China,
Yeah.
right? And you have other economies, India and others rising up. And we better be supporting our businesses and encouraging our businesses and encouraging future entrepreneurs and encouraging more and more, not discouraging them. And when they see all these antitrust in the news, and how much is enough, right? I mean, the last
Right.
episode we talked about taxes and
Hey.
regulations and all these matters. And, businesses, we know we run businesses and we invest in
Mm-hmm.
businesses. You know, Businesses go through so much, and business
Sure.
leaders and sorts. And to throw in more issues like antitrust,
Mm-hmm.
that's going to hurt. And the difference in the United States is, businesses, you're on your own. It's not like in
Right.
China where you're controlled by the government and you have to do what they tell you. And that's why it's a little interesting over there, right?
That's
um,
one. That's one adjective.
and that's why no one wants to do business over there unless you're an American company. But if we keep the way we're going, we might as well have our own government owned pieces of businesses here.
Right. And that's honestly one of the last things that we would ever need. I mean, here's what a lot of people aren't seeing, and this is when people like Klobuchar and the Wrath of Khan, Lena Khan, start
Yeah,
pushing these
yeah. I don't
these
know which is worse,
initiatives.
Genghis or Lena. Sorry,
So
maybe
certainly
I
Lena.
pushed too far on that, but
Well, I mean, here's the problem: the modern idea of prioritizing the welfare of competition over the welfare of the consumer is absolutely idiotic, and it discredits the entire protection of competition that these people are saying is the goal of their hipster antitrust. Okay, if you are protecting competition and I suck at business, you are not going to legislate me back into existence. Okay, that's not how
that is
competition
such
works.
a good point, man. I mean,
Sure.
that's probably one of the best lines I've heard about this. I mean, that is so spot on. You know, you can't regulate crappy business. Sorry.
No.
If
Right.
you suck at what you do and you make mistakes, which by the way, it's fine, but that's how you learn. Like, you and I have had plenty of failures in business, right? But
Hmm.
we've learned from them. We've gone back up on our feet and we did better. And as a result, our clients and our companies that we invest in benefit from it.
Hmm. Well, absolutely. And that's the problem with the modern approach is that for all of the virtue signaling that the talking heads like to give on the television or in online media, whatever, the modern approach is actually focused on materially disadvantaging competition, which means
Hmm.
you and me. Okay. What I'm supposed to do as a business, and we've said this before, if we're competing, my function in business is to kill you. I want you out of business because I want your customers.
Oh
Okay.
yeah.
And when you have this moralistic uh, high ground for antitrust, it ignores the fact that the old antitrust enforcement actions absolutely sucked. Okay, they were inconsistent, they were incoherent, they were
Hmm.
absolutely not neutral. The only thing that was guaranteed amongst them is that the government was going to win. Okay, and they was focused precisely on what's being focused on now, on protecting competition instead of consumers, which leads to things like government interventions and price floors. If, dear listener, if you want to see a truly horrible example of how government screws up everything, the sugar price floor that they
Oh
tried to
boy.
institute. Okay, that was intended to protect the little guy. Okay, oh, those darn Brazilians are coming in with their cheap sugar and putting our confectioners out of business and all of our suppliers out of business. Well, what ended up happening? I mean, sugar in confectionaries accounts for 40 to 70% of your ingredient cost, and you are fixing the minimum cost for that to help the sugar suppliers. Well, companies left. One in Wisconsin just hopped over the border to Canada, where this kind of governmental stupidity did not exist. Uh, you think that they brought everybody that they were employing with them? Like, hey, workers from the heartland of America, how about you come be Canadians if you want to keep your job? Of course not.
Right.
Okay, of
It's kind of
course not.
ironic because they're so about globalism, but
Right,
yet, they screw themselves over as a nation.
right. And I'm not,
And I'm talking about
I don't.
America, by the way.
Well, yeah, it's like I harp on the moralistic legislating because it's an easy target. But a lot of these efforts, they say they're focused on protecting consumers, whatever. Like all things in politics, it's a bloody lie. Okay, what they're focused on is reducing the political clout of businesses. Okay, if you take the megalith and you break it up, in theory, each of the little pieces cannot influence via lobbying as much as the megalith. Okay, that may be a noble goal. All right, and again, our episode is not on Citizens United or anything of the sort.
Oh hell no.
It's a noble goal to ensure that no group of organizations has too much political clout and too much influencing with lobbying. Okay, fine, but there's not an objective way to do that, right? There is no objective metric to do that if that's your goal. And again, the only objective metric that we have is the consumer welfare standard. So if you're trying to bust up Amazon, because was it Warren got butt hurt because she said that Amazon was heckling her on Twitter? Like, come on, you're a lawmaker. You need to have thicker skin than
Yeah,
that.
this isn't
Okay.
high school or middle school. Like, stop being petty.
Apparently it is.
Which
Apparently it
unfortunately,
is.
Congress gets more petty by the day, and it's hurting our not only our economy but us as a society, as a country, right?
Right.
And I think government needs to realize that anti, actually, sorry, I think antitrust should be adjusted to government should not be competing with the private sector. That's
Well,
the
it
real
can't.
antitrust. No,
It
but you know what
never
I mean,
has
though,
been able
right?
to. Right.
Yeah, you know what I mean. I mean, that's end of the day, that's what I see more of. It's government competing with private sector and harming private sector when they're supposed to be the ones protecting consumers, their citizens,
Hmm.
right? That's their goal. And then the consumer welfare standard is around that, protecting consumers. End of the day, they're the ones who are supposed to be enforcing that, not using their own petty reasons to enforce antitrust. I think that's
Right.
what missing. And also, again, the sugar example is just brilliant. That's a perfect example of, the government for, who's all about globalism, forgetting that we're also competing with the global world,
Hmm.
right? It's like, yes,
Right.
you and I are all about a global economy. Like, global economy is great, but we need to
Sure.
remember we're competing globally. So that's why we have to support our companies
Right.
and support them and give them all the tools and resources to succeed. Now, yes, obviously we have to keep them in check, right? In other ways, not antitrust, but in
Hmm.
other ways, whether it's environmental or abuse of employees or whatnot. But that's an antitrust. And unless it's,
Right.
like back in the day, like you said, when competing in wagons or building oil pipelines and sorts, and the world was not as accessible or is not as like it is today, then
Right.
okay, I can see that. But we're in a modern world and a modern economy. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
I think I told you this before. Remember last year when antitrust started to pop a little bit more? I was
Right.
like, okay, if people hate social media so much the way it is now, okay, look, how about you and I, Willie, could create a company called Costa Vong Social Media. You know, there's no filter whatsoever. Feel free to talk. I mean, I'm not saying we're doing this, but look, because we have such an accessible world because of technology and the internet and so forth, you and I could put a business. We can Google how to build a business plan. We can Google how to literally, create code or find people that can code and create apps and create
Right.
websites and that platform. And we can find ways to raise capital. There's if you don't like it, create your own. And that's again the beauty of the free market. And these
Right.
politicians like Josh Hawley or Amy Klobuchar, if you hate it so much and you think it's such a harm, why don't you create your own social media company then? Right?
Well, because they can't. That's why, it used to be those that can't do teach. Well, I think the statement should be those that can't do legislate. Uh, and
I think
you
that's
know,
more accurate because we need teachers, right? Definitely need
oh boy,
teachers and professors in this world.
yeah,
But
we need more teachers than we do politicians.
oh my
That's for
Lord, have
sure.
mercy. Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's a problem then because the modern push is to use antitrust as a Swiss Army knife, okay, which is the exact opposite of what it was meant for, whether you adhere to CWS or not. Antitrust is for very specific applications. Why are they doing it? Well, I mean, if Senator Warren goes on record saying she wants to bust up Amazon because she got heckled by their tweets, okay, that just on the surface is not what antitrust is supposed to be for. Okay, if I don't know how soft you have to be to get elected and abuse your power like this, but if you have a serious harm to consumers and that's your case and that's what you want to build, great. Okay, that's an antitrust application. But if you want to, you mentioned that the government shouldn't try to compete with private industry. I
Right.
mentioned that they can't. Let's talk about the IBM antitrust case, which
Oh
some of
boy.
our listeners may or may not have lived through because it started in the 60s. All right, in 1969. Okay, IBM controlled the mainframe market, and if you don't know what that is, congratulations, you live in the 21st century. It's what seeded the cloud, so
Right.
to speak.
Even though
Okay,
the
so
summer of '69 was fantastic. I wasn't alive, but
yeah, I was gonna.
right.
You weren't even a hot date yet.
No, still not.
So in 69, IBM got sued, and the allegation was that they were monopolizing the general purpose digital computer market. I don't even know what the hell that even means because that's not a market that exists anymore. But anyway, this case was, very huge. Everybody was, busy beating their chest and doing what we now call virtue signaling. IBM are putting the little guy out of business. And okay, so what happens? Well, first thing that happens in any legal case is discovery. And in this case, discovery alone took 6 years. And that was not free. That's an annualized cost of 50 to $100 million every year in 1970s money. According to, there's an estimate from William Page and John Lopatka's book, The Microsoft Case. 50 to $100 million every single year is being wasted on this antitrust effort, plus the indirect costs of litigation. Okay, so this goes on for 13 years, and if you read the details of this case, it's ridiculous. Like a million plus pages of testimony were created, and it is literally tons of paperwork that was created during the course of this debacle. And on the 13th year, after all this money had been spent, after 50 to 100 million plus indirect costs per year had been spent, the government, for reasons that, no logical person can understand, voluntarily dismisses the case. Why? Why was that the outcome? Well, part of it is because the market evolved. Mainframes are
Right.
not a thing anymore, at least not the way they were in the 50s. Okay, what do we learn from this? Number one, that antitrust legislation and antitrust legislators are absolutely hopeless at doing their job. Okay, that's the trivial answer. That's the baseline. No one's gonna be impressed that we argue that government is ineffectual. But what actually happened is that technology and innovation made everything about the case utterly obsolete. Remember the wagon wheel example. Okay.
Right. And I mean, the tech world, as you know, in the
Yeah.
tech world, 13 years is a century. I mean,
Oh
that's
yeah.
a lot of time in tech and
Yeah.
innovation.
Absolutely. And IBM's dominance as the world's superpower in mainframe computing was no longer relevant. Okay.
No, I
The
mean, we're seeing
market
today.
evolved. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Oh,
mean,
yeah, we're
look
definitely
at
seeing it today.
today. I mean, IBM, people, people realize like people think too much in the now when they have to
Right.
look at the free market, just let it go because it's going to happen. With IBM, it's going to happen with Amazon at some point. It's going to happen with
Sure.
Facebook. Hell, with Facebook, I think you're starting to see
I
it.
think it's already
You know,
happening already
yeah,
with TikTok.
it's already
Facebook are
happening,
hemorrhaging users.
and that's the only reason why they had to go with had to buy Instagram.
Right.
But again, like TikTok and other social media companies are taking over. But back to IBM,
Yeah.
as you said, the market took over, and the market said, "Sorry, IBM, you're too old school. You haven't fully innovated. You completely messed up with." This is more today than back then, but
Mhm.
you completely messed up with IBM Watson. It's practically useless. No other, and people are denying IBM's acquisition request now. So
Right.
again, the free market works itself out. Would you
Right.
look at that? And as
Uh,
you and as you said again, during that 13 years of that case for IBM, they wasted so much money when that money, I guarantee you, could be better used for government, right? I mean, that's our
yep.
taxpayer dollars being wasted when it could be done
Yep.
for, I don't know, infrastructure. That's the hot thing right now,
Oh yeah. Well, I mean,
and
that's the thing. 50 to $100 million a year wasted on the IBM case. In the 70s, when 50 to $100 million was actually a lot of money.
yeah,
Okay, God
and
God
in
knows what that
total,
is today.
yeah, and in
That
total,
probably
13
was the
years.
infrastructure bill.
And in total, in 13 years, let's round up. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
that's a lot. That's $1.3 billion.
Yeah.
And and if you do, if you make that $1.3 billion fast forward to today in equivalents, that's a lot of money. So no, the
I
IBM
don't have the
case.
conversion rate memorized, but yeah,
No, me
it's
neither. That's why I was trying to make myself sound intelligent, but I think I sound dumber. Uh,
I think you
but no,
failed.
yeah, screw you. But also another point too. I mean, you showed me the other day. What was it? IBM no, it was Intel. Sorry, but
Mhm.
that made the better chip. Was that IBM or Intel?
Uh, okay, so that was the die shrink. Uh, It was not Intel, because Intel with the Lake family were kind of stuck on the
Right.
7 nanometer and then the 5 nanometer. But yeah,
So
the
it was
new,
IBM, right?
I think it may have been. If not,
Right. You
we'll
sent
get
to me the
hate
other
mail for it.
day.
I did
Yeah, it
send it to
was
you the other
the
day, but I don't live in the past anymore.
no, I think it was the chips that are really revolutionary now,
Right, the two
right?
nanometer gates.
Right. So again, IBM was pushed into a corner big time because they're really struggling. And look what came out: better technology innovation. Yes, they've been
Right.
struggling for a while, but they didn't need the antitrust case at all during that
No,
time.
no.
They went up and
The
down.
market obviated their power, and no regulation was necessary. We spent a
Right.
billion or so dollars in 1970s money on nothing
Right. And
at
as
the
a
end of the day.
reminder, yeah, and as a reminder, uh, yeah, I actually lost my train of thought there. Crap. But it'll come back to me. But the long story short of it is, the free market works, and oh, sorry, I actually it came back to me now. Sorry. It's
Oh yeah,
the the when we say the market, we mean the consumer.
right. The
That's what we mean.
consumer demands something that is not
Right.
being offered. So I mean, what at the end of the
I
day,
want to
I
make
would
that
argue.
clear. If Elizabeth Warren or Bernie or Amy Klobuchar or even what's her name, Lena Khan is listening,
Lena
and
Khan. I don't
I
think
wouldn't be
they're listening
surprised.
to us.
You never know. I mean, you'd be
The
surprised.
NSA might be, but I don't think they are.
Trust me. I got a text from someone last week. I know a couple texts. One was from a C-suite of a Fortune, I would say 20 company,
Oh
right, top
wow,
20, and also a senator. So we may not have that many
nice.
visitors, but the quality over quantity, right? Sorry to
All I get
sidetrack.
are texts that ask me for my social security number.
Oh, please don't give it out.
Oh, I gave them yours.
Well, actually, because of that, we should start regulating, you know, your mind that you shouldn't give your social security number out.
Well, maybe that's what Elon and Neuralink are going to do for us in a couple years.
I knew you were going to say that. That's why I said that.
We're
I
going to have
mean,
regulation that prevents you from thinking certain things. I'm all
yeah,
for it as long as it prevents you from thinking something stupid.
right, but yeah, that's. I mean, that should be another episode. But
Probably will be.
that scares the hell out of me about a chip in a brain. That's kind of
Yeah, no.
biblical.
Oh, sure. I mean, they're going to have a really small
Mark of the
customer
beast.
base. Yeah, well, most people go in to get a chip put in their brain, and the surgeons won't be able to find anywhere to install it. But it's fascinating to me that you know well, it's not fascinating that politicians haven't learned their lesson, but if people don't want to look at the IBM case because they think it's an offshoot or an outlier or whatever,
Yeah.
you were young enough or old enough, depending on how you want to cut it, to remember the Microsoft bust up.
Oh
Okay,
yeah, our
like
buddy
that.
Bill Gates.
Yeah, like that was another decade plus embarrassment, and it's not just the DOJ antitrust goon squad hounding Microsoft, despite the fact that Microsoft and the government already reached a settlement in '94. In my uneducated mind, that's called harassment.
Right. And by the way, the
But
world should thank Microsoft for Apple because that's how
right,
Steve Jobs came up with,
sure,
Apple. He was like, wait a minute, hold on a second. There has to be a better computer than Microsoft, right? Or a better server, whatever you call it. Sorry.
right,
I
no,
sound like a boomer now.
browser or
Yeah,
yeah, whatever
browser.
thing,
Yeah.
a technical thing.
Yeah.
Uh,
Technical thing.
but but again,
I should know this.
what kind of tech investor are you? You should be
I know.
ashamed of yourself.
Yeah, we're so
Uh,
advanced now in AI that we're just losing everything. Yeah.
we're so
Everything
advanced
in the
in
past.
artificial intelligence, we forgot our own natural intelligence.
Yep.
But and again, this is one of those fascinating cases that I highly recommend people read through and get really pissed off about. Uh,
Hmm.
the same anti-competitive protection of competition narrative that we see today comes from this, right? When Microsoft were the government tried to force Microsoft to include Netscape, which already had millions of users. It already had an established base. It was absolutely not a
Wait, what's
small
Netscape
company.
again?
Maybe you're not old enough to remember this.
I'm messing with you. Hey,
Yeah.
consumers. Hey, consumers rooted out. And by the way, sorry to jump in again, but I don't know if you heard the announcement.
What's that?
Microsoft is deleting Internet Explorer and replacing it with Edge, and people don't
Which is an even
realize.
worse product.
Yeah. So again, market, consumers spoken. They like Google Chrome better.
Right. Well, because it works and
Yeah.
it's
And I'm
secure.
sure someday Google Chrome's going to face a better browser that's probably going to be involved with virtual reality or augmented
Augmented
reality.
reality. Yeah.
So it's
Well,
like, hey,
and that's the thing. That's a great example, right? Internet Explorer sucked. Always has. The
oh my
best thing
god,
that IE is for is to download Chrome. And before Chrome, the best thing that IE was for was to download Firefox or like
and to get
to literally do
viruses.
anything and to get you viruses, right? But if you think back to the Microsoft case, the government when the government stepped in, it was trying to force inclusion of Netscape. Okay, that is meddling and it ignores the market reality that Netscape already had millions of people using it anyway. Okay,
Right.
the legislation wasn't about protecting the consumer, it was about so called helping spur competition, but all it ended up doing was helping Netscape. Okay,
Yep.
what are the odds that we're going to see the exact same thing now, okay, with legislators who are completely blind as to how the world works,
Well, I
and they're
want to
going to
see
say,
the
"Well,
lobbying money too.
well, sure, sure." I know people pile on politicians a lot and call them idiots and whatever, but we both know they're just parroting out whatever they get told to say by the people who pay their lobbying firms, right? You
Yep.
cannot actually get to that position of power in this country by being a complete moron. So
Yep.
even though they act stupid, the sad part is I think they actually know what they're doing and they
Yeah.
do it anyway.
Yeah.
But the big thing that we have now that we didn't have with Microsoft as much, and we certainly didn't have with the IBM case, was the network effects. Okay,
Hmm.
your stuff gets more powerful as more people use it, but even though the modern lawmakers are parroting this out as well, this the network effects that is new and it's something unique to big tech and to Facebook. That's not true. Okay, you know what the first network effect phenomenon was in this country? Railroads
Whoa, whoa,
or
whoa.
the
Railroads?
gauge on rails. Okay, the more people that adopt a certain gauge of rails, the less likely someone wants is going to be to want to adopt another one. Just
Holy
like
crap! I didn't know
phone
that.
companies. Okay, if you don't adopt the Bell system, or the more people that adopt the Bell system, the less likely you are to want to adopt another one. The more people that
Mm.
adopt Facebook, the less likely someone is to want to adopt something else. I'm
Right,
TikTok,
but
I
again,
guess.
with the
I'm so not
no, but
cool
again, but
when
you're
it
right,
comes to
right?
social media.
No, but you're right about the rail system and the Bell system with the phones, right? The rail system, yes, we still have Amtrak and everything, but now we got cars, right? And now we
Sure.
got airplanes. And then with the Bell system and the old school, ring, ring, ring phones, you had to press the big buttons and crap, and slam the phone.
I
Now
saw that
you
in the
have,
movie once. I didn't know what was going on. I thought the character was talking to himself.
right. And as you said, that was a network effect, but now we have a different network effect. Now we got mobile phones, cell phones,
Right.
right? And then,
And that's the
I
thing.
never
The
know, down the road, we'll have Neuralinks phones in our
Sure.
heads. Who
Well, yeah,
knows? But
exactly.
but as you
That's what I was
said,
going to say.
yeah, network effects are not new.
Right. And that's the thing that people need to realize. Microsoft is another example of government intervention doing absolutely nothing but wasting taxpayer money. Okay,
Hmm.
DOJ did not destroy Microsoft. DOJ did not invalidate Microsoft's dominance in the software and computer world. What wedged Microsoft, what pried out Microsoft from their position of power? Smartphones, apps, social media. Well, who gives a damn about Outlook anymore when we have all these other options? Okay, we have LibreOffice or we have Google Sheets or Google Drive or whatever. You know, these are market advancements that drove consumer usage of technology into directions that honestly I don't think anybody in the 90s when this case started could have imagined. Okay, and if they could have imagined it, they couldn't have built it because the technology didn't exist. You could not have had an iPhone in 1994, all right, because the manufacturing probably wouldn't have been there, right? And it's
Right.
just it's another example of the anti-consumer welfare standard arguments that use network effects are completely invalid because they're just anti-bigness, and you're seeing that now with attacks on companies like Facebook and Google. We keep
And by the way, that's
bringing them up.
hypocritical.
They're not paying us to mention their names, but they're just the current targets. But these arguments completely ignore the fact that the market is not static. It never has been, and if anything, technology is accelerating how that market develops. We're seeing, we mentioned before, Facebook hemorrhaging users to TikTok, especially in the kid, teen, young adult groups, but also globally, you have the all-in-one apps like WeChat that
Oh,
are,
right. Yeah.
social media, texting, banking, Venmo, like everything just shoehorned into one. Uh, Obviously, we don't have WeChat a lot here, but that's an app that could only have been created in the modern age. It could have only been created in the time of digital natives. Okay, that we have people who are growing up with, smartphones that were more powerful than supercomputers were, back in the IBM
Well, even
days.
developing countries, right? Like
Right. Even
Southeast
yeah,
Asia,
exactly. No,
Vietnam,
that's a great
Africa.
point.
Yeah, African nations. They're I mean, at least for us, when you and I were born, we started. It wasn't until what? I mean, obviously we started with PCs and computers, and
Oh
then
yeah.
I forget my first memory of a iMac was, remember those old chunky iMacs with the light
Yeah,
blue
with the little
color,
half
whatever.
circle bottom or
Yeah,
whatever. It was like
yeah,
teal and see-through.
exactly. I think that was like
I
in
still
middle
wanted one.
school. Yeah, and I think it was in middle school, and then we had what, the razors and the you know
Razors.
the
Yep.
crackberries and sorts.
Right.
So no, so that's what's the difference. We started with all those, and now you're seeing developing countries with starting with powerful smartphones like
Oh
iPhone
yeah.
or the Droid phones. So imagine what innovations will come out of that, right? And that
Right.
includes the United States because we have generations now that are being born and coming into the world. I mean, I was at a restaurant the other week, or no, sorry, the other day. I'm a fat ass, so I eat everything. And I saw this baby watching a movie from an iPhone, a baby. So that's their
Right.
first interaction with technology. So imagine
Right.
if that child is really entrepreneurial down the road. Imagine all the ideas and thoughts that that child will have, it can do. And that's going
Sure.
to really, again, with the free market, that's going to dethrone these companies. These are companies.
Right. And I mean, and here's the thing, Ben. And we're gonna keep mentioning Facebook. Apparently, that's just what we're doomed to do
Well, they're
today.
just easy to kick right now.
Right. They're the
And by the way,
example that everybody
Facebook, I
understands.
love you, everything,
We want a
you're,
quarter every time we said your name.
yeah, we're not hating on you. You're just right now an easy guinea pig.
Right. Well, I mean, they're like I said, they're the easy victim for legislative attention. Okay, Facebook was created in the era of desktop and laptop computer dominance, right? They have adapted incredibly well to the smartphone era, okay, but
Unlike MySpace.
they're being unlike MySpace.
Look, I miss
Uh,
MySpace, man.
I yeah, fight for my top 8, man. But we Facebook is a great example of a company that's had to continually reinvent itself and reinvent its capabilities in order to survive.
Right.
Okay, Facebook did not buy Instagram because they were nice. Okay, Facebook did not buy Instagram because it really liked their logo. I think Facebook needed to incorporate Instagram, needed to incorporate
Oh,
things like
100%.
WhatsApp to remain relevant.
Yeah.
That's the speed that we move at these days. Okay, like WhatsApp was not invented by a global super conglomerate. Okay, it wasn't quite the backyard invention either. It was an established company, but if you're going to compare their size pre-acquisition to Facebook size, it doesn't matter how many people were backing WhatsApp. It doesn't matter, how smart or clever the developers were. When you compare them to Facebook, they were a grain of rice. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, Facebook, I think, get it, right? Because the modern age is everything that is to do with your personal life, you have ready access to right in your pocket, whether it's bill pay, banking, buying stuff,
Yeah.
whatever. We have this extensive and arguably excessive interconnectedness, but the world of today does not resemble in any way, shape, or form the world in which the Sherman Act was drafted. It does not resemble
Yeah.
the world in which the Clayton Act was drafted. But those are still the Swiss Army knife tools that legislators are trying to use. They're not even in the 21st century. They're barely in the 20th century of understanding lessons from history. Okay, they obviously don't get how tech or the market works, but they're unwilling to recognize that they don't know. Okay, like I will never see Senator Warren or Klobuchar or Bernie. I'm never going to see them on an interview saying, you know what, I have no clue how any of this works. So we're going to hire people who are 1/3 our age and actually understand the technology to educate us before we try passing
Right.
regulation to control it. That's never going to happen. Okay, we saw that with the Facebook hearings. Like, well, how do you make money, Mr. Zuckerberg? Like, well,
Right.
we sell ads, dumbass. Um, you know, these
Right.
are the people that are in charge of regulation, and my question is why? Okay, they're obviously incapable of doing their jobs properly, but why
Right.
do they continue to harp on these companies from an antitrust standpoint? Just say, you know what, we want to bust you up because you're too big. Just be honest with the foreign to
No,
a
no, 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 no,
politician.
no, no. To be truly honest, you hurt my feelings. So I want to bust you up because I'm the seat of power. They talk about companies being too big, right? How about government being too big for
Oh,
for
well,
crying
yeah.
out loud? I mean, let's talk about we the people could do antitrust on them. Again, I'm not trying to be political. I'm not a far right guy, nor am I a far left guy. I'm like back in the day. I'm much more of an independent. Just to be clear with people, we think with logic, not with political incentive. And also, like you said before, Instagram and WhatsApp never had to sell. They didn't have to. They could have
Right.
the choice. But that goes into something else that's I think we should touch on is the culture of entrepreneurship and business.
Yes,
You have a world today
absolutely.
in where a lot of entrepreneurs and companies, and a lot of this is because of the hype around being an entrepreneur, right? They're like, oh, get rich quick and all that. First off, that's
I
not the
wish.
case,
I
right?
wish.
And they see these movies or Instagram stars or influencers, and I have to let people know most of them are lying. Uh, you know, but two, I think we gotta take a step back and really we need to get back into the mindset of creating great things for better good and for consumers, not just to make more money. I mean, money, obviously, everyone wants to make more money,
Well, money will
but,
come.
money would come if you focus on a true mission, right? And I think that's the big problem we have today. And, it's not an antitrust issue, it's really a cultural issue and even education or even societal issues. You have people that just want to build something and sell out. Again, I'm not blaming
Right.
them. If that's your goal, go ahead. Like that's fine.
Sure.
But I think you'll see, I think these comes in cycles. You look at history, it may not repeat, but it'll definitely rhyme. And I think there's going to be a surge of new type of entrepreneurs that will not care about money even and just want to create real change in products and services, and they'll create companies that can take on these big ones head on. I mean,
Right.
it happens every so often.
Kind of like a
And
social entrepreneurship.
yeah, exactly. And I think that's what's going to happen.
Sure.
Um, and I think that's what's the point of missing that people need to realize, you know, be patient. Just let the market, let the market work itself out, because it always does.
Right. Certainly
And
faster than the government does.
oh,
But let me ask you
absolutely.
something, Vin. Let me ask you something. So let's assume that these misguided lemmings actually are successful,
Right.
and Facebook bad, naughty, get a wrist slap. Okay, now you go out and you do, I don't know, something fancy, something
Right.
clever, right? You get your keyboard and you make stuff. You want to sell out now to Facebook because you want the 19-20 billion dollar payday. You want the ability to buy an island and say, see a world. I'm gonna go eat fish and lay on the sand for the rest of my days.
Yeah, there's no motivation to build a company.
Right, but now you want to sell out to Facebook or Google, and now you can't because that acquisition is challenged by this hipster antitrust
Right.
mentality of this moral legislation. How pissed off and betrayed are you going to feel that your own government, in the hopes of protecting competition, has essentially screwed you out of reaping the rewards for your labor?
Yeah, I mean, oh man, yeah, I mean, my blood's boiling right now just you saying that. But
Don't have a seizure. It's just a podcast.
yeah, no, I'll try not to. No, I think that's going to crush the American dream, right? That's going to really crush the American dream. And to add further to what you just said, it's going to create an economic disadvantage for the United States as well as a national security concern. The reason why you like a free market and heavy competition and letting people duke it out is because it's not going to benefit consumers, but our country is a consumer.
Right.
You're seeing so much competition now from other nations, as we mentioned before, especially China. They're trying to kick our ass right now, and their own government is funding and fueling their own companies. I mean, yes, we
Right.
disagree that government should. I mean, we both agree that government should never own a piece of a company, but you see it in China, and that's the
Sure.
reality we have to deal with. Is understand your. I'm not saying they're an enemy. They're definitely an ally, but they're an ally not playing by the same rules, right? And we have to
Right.
understand that we need to take advantage of our system and amplify the free market, right? To really encourage people and to support our companies to do even better. Because if you're going to tell Google and Amazon and Facebook and the trickle down of all other companies and innovations and companies that haven't been started yet, that we're going to break you up no matter what, right? Even if it's for our own political agenda, what motivation are they going to have to continue to grow and be better? It's going to be more about survival other
Right.
than taking risk and driving innovation. I think that's the key thing, right? But
Right.
key part about being a business is taking risk, especially on products and services to
And
be
being
better.
rewarded for the risk.
Yeah, exactly. And they're not getting rewarded. I mean, that's going to be really of concern, and that's why I see it's an economic disadvantage and a national security concern. Because if our again, China is an ally but also an enemy, right? Because we don't see eye to
Right.
eye on many things, and ultimately, a lot of our other nations want to see us go down because we've been the world power for so long. And if we get
Right.
complacent and pass these antitrust matters, and our companies become complacent or they move out, and we stall innovation, we're going to be
Hmm.
screwed. We're going to be
Oh yeah.
absolutely screwed. And you're already
Sure.
seeing that with rare earth minerals. You're seeing
Oh
that
yeah.
with, and again, I know rare earth minerals sound old school, but hey, I'm pretty sure you're either listening on a computer or a phone. Your
Yeah.
computer
They
has
power
roughly,
this podcast.
yeah, I mean, every how you're listening to this, whether it's through the internet or again from the internet to your phone or computer to your headphones or speaker, it's all fueled by rare earth minerals,
Yep.
and 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 to mine and to drive those and to refine them takes technology innovation, and we're
Hmm.
behind on that. And then on top of that, you see us being behind in artificial intelligence. Again, that's more innovation and that's more advancements there. And to not encourage and to reward risk in our country for people to drive further AI and to do that, that scares me. And for all the
Right.
money they're spending on antitrust and for all these butthurt politicians that are trying to take revenge because because of dumbass users are playing them like a damn fiddle by
Yeah.
using social media platforms. instead of focusing on, okay, how can we as a country incentivize more entrepreneurship and innovation? That's, we have our priorities all messed up. And
Right.
it's really sad to see. And I think we're going to pay a price for it. And I really hope that people, and I hope this podcast helps, right? People understand what antitrust is now, and they should read books
Sure.
around this and study it more. Don't just listen to us, right? Google it. Whether it's just Google antitrust cases or whatnot, get opinions from both sides. We want people to hear from both sides and make your own judgment. And even look up Judge Bork and his book Antitrust Paradox. I think it just got recently republished, right, on Amazon or something like
It
that.
did.
I mean, we should know because we're friends with his son.
Well, I am currently working my way through it. It's very, very, very in depth.
But that's a good thing. That means it's full of substance, not just a bunch of
It's incredible
theoretical
substance. It's very
hearsay,
substantial.
right?
It's certainly beyond my intellectual capability to understand without Google, which is why we have Google in the first place.
Yeah,
But it is a
maybe we should
fantastic
get
book.
maybe we should get Bob Bork Jr. on this podcast at some point to talk more about it.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, no, we
That
definitely
would
should.
be cool. No,
Yeah,
and you bring up a good point. I think even if people are not incentivized in this country to succeed, and let's be honest, the easiest way to incentivize anybody is with money. Okay, you can change the world all you want, but the simple fact is you'll be a lot happier changing the world when you're rich than changing the world when you're dumpster diving and sleeping in a box.
yeah. It's a
Okay, money's
win-win.
going to fix a lot of your problems, if not all of them. What people seem to forget or gloss over is, I do very much believe in the argument that money not only makes you happy, it makes you a better person, right? Because if you can contribute more to your causes, etc., it greases the wheels a lot. But
Right.
we have a lot to be thankful to these monopolists for in the modern age, right? Like the fact that we can now afford an automobile because Henry Ford democratized the affordability of it is substantial. The
Right.
fact that
Absolutely.
I don't know, Carnegie Mellon or Carnegie Hall, where the hell do you think they got their names from?
Yeah.
It maybe was drawn out of a hat. I don't know. Maybe that's certainly the opinion that modern legislators seem to have. People forget that a lot of these evil monopolists still contributed a great amount to society. And while it's going to sound strange that I'm going to sit here and say, Mark Zuckerberg contributed a great deal to society. Well, you analyze it logically, that he kind of has, right?
Yeah.
We have a connectedness and ability to communicate with anybody in the world that was physically impossible 30 years ago. Okay, you can complain all you want about Russian bots and fake news and blah blah blah, all that other
Right.
garbage. The
Yeah,
simple
but that's
fact is
human
that
nature
these
that you can't control
sure,
because it's
oh
always
yeah,
going to be
absolutely.
evil out anything you do.
Right, but that's why you need objective metrics
Right.
like CWS. You can trace a line that shows the world is better now because of Facebook, because of Google. Okay, you can argue monopolistic behavior all you want, but that is an objective metric. Our GDP has grown because of companies like this. We have tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of more software engineers and computer scientists, machine learning researchers, throw tech titles out. Okay, we have more people employed in those fields because of these companies than we would have otherwise.
Oh, and by the way, the world envies us. And if you notice,
Well, yeah,
I don't care. I mean, I don't care what nation you are. Many countries envy us and try to mimic us. Even China. Look
right,
at China. They are a damn communist country, but they're adapting capitalistic principles so they can actually get to where they want to be, which is a economic world power. They had
right.
to
Exactly.
they couldn't do it all. They needed to incentivize their people to get to the Jack Ma's of the world, right? They
Right.
had to. It's and for us to now stay to sit back and now and damage our free market that the world envies, and to attack our own companies, it's very sad to see. It's hypocritical and
It's
it's dangerous.
insane.
Well, it's absolutely dangerous, and
Yeah.
we just can't let it happen.
Well, you mentioned that China and other economies wanted to knock us down a peg or two and to supplant us as
Right.
the world economic leader. The question that gets begged is why the hell would they want to do that if we didn't have something to emulate? If we didn't have something worth copying and worth integrating into their own
Right.
society? We have been the world superpower when it comes to economics for so long because you can say it's American spirit. Yeah, you know what? People who immigrate to this country also have some of that American spirit. Okay, the point
No,
is,
not some, a lot
well,
of that
a
spirit.
lot of sure, a lot of them.
Our
Uh,
parents
our parents
or
are
some
great
of them.
examples,
Yeah.
but people here have made their dreams come true because this is the one country. We are unique. This is the one country in the world where you can make whatever future you want for yourself. And unlike some of the European countries or Nordic countries with their incredibly high tax rates, you can make yourself a billionaire here, and you can actually get to keep it. That's what's insane.
Yeah,
Sure,
exactly.
we don't have free everything, and our
Right.
public transit system kind of sucks compared to like Sweden's, but we can also keep our property, we can keep our wealth, and we can build something and say this is
Well, that's the
mine,
dream.
and no one else can touch it. That
But
is the
that's
dream.
it's the dream, and you mentioned the monopolistic people that people like Henry Ford, the Rockefellers, and all the people of today's modern day. They're, to me, they're not monopolistic power of people. They're just businessmen and regular people who built a great company or companies to accomplish their American dream. And sorry, they just did it better than everyone else. Sorry.
Yeah,
And two things,
absolutely.
because of them, they are driving more competition that can create better products, which drives innovation. And two, they become a standard for people to work towards. Like,
Right.
that's America, right? Like, you and I
Absolutely.
talk a lot about Warren Buffett, right? We talk about Mike Bloomberg.
Yep.
We talk about a lot of these people, and they are the standard that we both work towards. I mean, look, we want to be ourselves, right? But we also look to them as motivation, and that's why our
Right.
country is so damn great. Is because you have the people like that you can look up to and aspire to be like, and
Right.
that's what we need to not forget, and that's why I don't like even calling them monopolistic. And look, and to them, and this whole, I'm kind of sidetracking here with the wealth gap thing and all these people
Yeah.
trying to use that as a weapon, especially politicians. You can't look. People make different sacrifices, and they took risk, and they have earned what they have today. And these people aren't, I'm not saying all of them are saints, but a lot of them also give back to society, not only in business by creating jobs and driving innovation and sorts. But we talked about this yesterday about Mike Bloomberg. He's another good
Hmm.
example of somebody. Yes, he's created a hell of an empire, but he
Sure.
spurred a lot of competition. There's a lot of competition with
Oh yeah.
Bloomberg, and he's actually helped fintech push forward because people want to compete and be a better standard. But he gives a lot of money back. I mean, he
Oh
gives a
yeah.
lot of money back to society, whether it's fighting, against cancer or poverty, or people, against smoking, which has helped a lot of people live longer, or mental health, or that matter. And Koch brothers, yes, you may see them as evil, but if you live in the Northeast and you've been diagnosed with cancer, you got to thank the
Right.
Koch brothers, because a lot of the cancer centers are funded by them. So you
Right.
can't, so we can't make this, you know, rich versus poor, or the way I look at it, American versus American. We got to look at it as that we need to support one another and drive one another. And if I was president of the United States today, I would honestly be more like, FDR is a good example. Remember during World War II, with industrial complex, we
Hmm.
need another industrial complex type movement in this country, because we are entering an era and where we really got to step our shit up and
Yeah,
really drive innovation, or we're going to fall behind. Whether it's
sure.
cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, future technologies, and sorts. So
Well, I mean, in
that's what we have
FDR's
to focus
world,
on.
in FDR's time, it was axles and gears.
Yeah,
It was aircraft, it was tanks, it was the arsenal of
right,
democracy.
right.
And today, it's chips, it's
Yeah,
software, it's AI, it's machine
yeah.
learning.
Oh, and by the way,
It.
Reagan
Uh-huh.
was the space war with Russia.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No,
So,
so
no, I mean, this is, it couldn't be more spot on of a conversation, and I hope people take out of this conversation to really rethink what government's role is, why business
mhm.
is great, and why you can't blame business for your personal issues or for government issues, and how to rethink about how the world truly works. I mean, I like to say there's a lot. The world isn't full of sunshine and rainbows and holding hands and skipping and everything is
Right,
perfect. The world isn't perfect, but we can do our best to have a society that allows you to do what you want to do, so long that you're
right.
willing to take the risk and go through the tough times to get to where you need to.
Sure, and, I mean, honestly, if people are really that upset about the evil monopolies of the modern age, uh, do something about it. If you
Yeah,
don't like Facebook dominating what you perceive to be as news outlets or, social media or whatever it is that you want to focus on, no one's got a gun to your head saying don't build something better.
right,
Okay, don't wait for your politicians to do it because we've already seen multiple times that they can't, or
right.
that they'll just waste our taxpayer money pursuing efforts that have no merit. You know, go make something better. And then when you go through what Bezos and Zuck and the Google guys and everyone else, when you go through what they went through to build your company up, maybe you'll have a better perspective as opposed to just sitting on your ass complaining about it.
Yeah, I mean, could you imagine the current political atmosphere with, the wrath of Khan, Amy Klobuchar, Josh Hawley, and all these guys today, back in the day when planes and cars and sorts were just invented and they became big? Like, you look at
Right.
today, I mean, I sent you an article about the innovations we've had in 66 years from when the plane and the cars were invented to
Hmm.
today. I mean, look at it.
Oh,
Look at how many
the
different.
right flyer until Apollo
Yeah,
11. Yeah, it was like
yeah.
63
6
years, 66
years.
years, something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, during that time, you didn't see much antitrust, did you? I mean, it was just,
not
hey,
against them.
no, it's like, hey, let's push to be the best. You know,
Right.
you look at, cars from Henry Ford to today. Look how many car options you have now. Planes,
Sure.
look all the plane, you're an aerospace engineer. Look all the plane options we have, right?
Right.
So I see it as the same for the things we see today. Amazon pioneered a massive platform way of not only for retail e-commerce but for cloud
Hmm.
computing. And but I guarantee you there's going to be more and more competition popping out, and you're already seeing it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
that's the reality people have to remember. It's like, stop thinking short term, think long term, and just and trust the system and focus on what you can do. And our politicians, I mean, it's really the politicians, to be quite frank. The politicians got to get together, and we the people got to vote better. We got to vote better.
Well,
And
that goes back to education now, doesn't it?
yeah, it does. It in 2 episodes it all comes in full circle, doesn't it?
Yeah, we're never going to run out of content because it's always going to be how can we be less stupid as a species? Well, we need to get our brains fixed better.
Right.
So,
But I wouldn't trust Elon Musk to do it,
no, I would
my
just trust them
opinion.
to pay for
Well, we'll see how long that lasts with Tesla's valuation. But that's a whole nother
it. That'll be
uh
next week.
yeah, that'll be another episode. But I think that wraps up today's episode, and we really appreciate everyone listening in. We've had great feedback for our first pilot episode, so we hope you continue to provide your feedback and let us know your thoughts and even ideas or other topics you want us to talk about. And we'll guess we'll sign off now. Thank you, Willie, for your time.
All right,
as always.
degenerates. We'll see you next time. So
All
long,
right,
Vin.
take care. Bye bye.